What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. Hope everybody had an amazing Christmas. We're right on the cusp of 2025, and that means every single YouTube channel on the planet is going to be doing their best of the year list, their worst of the year list, every kind of list you can possibly imagine. It is that time of the year, and this channel is going to be no exception. This particular list is going to be primarily focused with my top 10 favorite movies of 2024, but I've got a few side categories that I've slipped in there as well, including my top 10 Hall of Shame, as well as a few honorable mentions, and I've also got a special top 10 list consisting just of horror movies, because if there's one narrative for the movie biz in 2024 is that we had an excellent year of horror movies. In fact, there are so many good horror movies on my official top 10 list. 4 of them are within the horror genres. So huzzah if you're one of those people that likes watching really fucked up movies about people being ripped limb from limb or mutated into all new shapes and sizes or all the above. But I should acknowledge that I did struggle kind of whittling down my list to an acceptable number, because I feel like a top 10 list doesn't really have any value or meaning if you don't honestly struggle and make some hard choices about what makes it onto the list and what does not. And there are plenty of movies that I did not see, and I'll acknowledge which movies that were still on my to-do list by the end of the year. But I think this year I might have seen more new releases than in any other year, at least like new releases at the time of their release. Between the New York Film Festival and just going to the theater and that sort of thing, I saw a hell of a lot of new movies, and I played a lot of catch-up in November and December, but there's still plenty of movies left on my list. But at a certain point, you have to just say, I'm movied out. I can't watch any more new movies this year because I'm primarily interested in older movies. And also, there's always the danger of wrecking and ruining your interest in movies. One of my favorite film critics, A.O. Scott, I can't remember what year it was, but there was one year where he acknowledged he had reviewed, I think, 300 new releases. I might be getting the numbers wrong, but in essence, reviewing that many new releases in one year kind of like killed his interest in movies like in perpetuity. And I think now he mostly concerns himself with reviewing books, which I can totally understand. If you love movies, or if you love making movies, or if you love talking about movies, don't burn out by doing the things that are like obligatory, like follow your bliss, follow your passion. If you like editing, edit like a madman. If you like watching old movies, watch old movies. I feel like people get way too preoccupied with thinking, oh, I have to see such and such movies because they might be nominated for Best Picture. Who the fuck cares what might get nominated for Best Picture? Because in the long run, most of the Best Picture nominees are forgotten, and they just kind of, wash on down the river of time, or whatever metaphor you want to use. But as I was whittling down my list, I noticed that I had way too many movies in my honorable mention category. Like initially, I think I had like 35 or 40 movies in there because they might have a performance I like, or they might be by a director I really like, or I just felt like I needed to give them a shout out. But I've been reviewing movies all year long. They've already gotten their shout outs. I feel like if you're going to be an honorable mention, there has to be like a really legit chance that you might have made the cut for the top 10. Otherwise, your honorable mentions don't really have any meaning or value. So I whittled down my honorable mentions to about 6 or 7 movies. So I think hopefully this list will be all killer, no filler. And furthermore, I know there'll be a lot of pushback and disagreement over some of my choices, and that's totally fine. If everybody had the same top 10 choices or top 10 picks, well, then there'd be no point in making the list, because we'd all know in advance what that top 10 list is. The whole point of making a list is for pushback and dissent and disagreement and that sort of thing. So please, I encourage everybody, include your top 10 list down in the comments below, or better still, make your own top 10 videos and or written articles and that sort of thing, because the world of film is better off when you have more film commentators, more film discussion, more filmmakers, etc. and so forth. So I do not claim that these are the best 10 movies of 2024. These are my favorite movies of 2024. And if you think my choices suck, great. Once again, make your own list. But before we get to my honorable mentions and my top 10, and I'll include time codes for all the different categories down below, but let's start things off by having our dessert first, by talking a little shit, because as much fun as it is to celebrate the great cinematic achievements of any given year, it's also equally fun just to roll up your sleeves and talk a little trash and spit in the eye of some filmmakers.
I can see the future.
She didn't see that coming?
That's not how it works.
That man is Ezekiel Sims. He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders.
But when you look back on a list of all the horrendous movies that you were willing to endure over the course of a year, it's a little bit like looking back at like a party that got out of hand, where perhaps you had one drink too many, or perhaps you took some drugs that you shouldn't have, or more importantly, perhaps you hooked up with one or more people that you should not have, and when you think back to the party, you're like, oh my God, like, why did I do that? Like, anyway, that's the way I feel about some of these movies. in the Hall of Shame. So let's start with Borderlands. A lot has been said about how video game adaptations when it comes to film and television are better than ever. Not so when it comes to Borderlands and Eli Roth. I feel like that was one of the movies that has successfully run Lionsgate's reputation and Eli Roth's reputation right into the ground. There will be no Borderlands 2 coming our way, but perhaps the worst movie that I saw in 2024, a strong contender, would be the director's cut of Rebel Moon. I don't know if there's a better example of a director who, once upon a time, was one of the most popular directors alive, who has more successfully run his directorial reputation into the ground than Zack Snyder. I mean, from his remake of The Dawn of the Dead to 300 to Watchmen, everyone's like, oh my God, like this guy's the shit. He's going to be, one of the biggest directors of his generation. And then we all loyally followed him through his DC trilogy, and that DC trilogy has a lot of good scenes. But since he made his director's cut of Justice League, I feel like he's been kind of adrift, and there's no better example of him being adrift than inside of 12 months releasing 4 Rebel Moon movies. You had your first Rebel Moon, your second Rebel Moon, and then you had the director's cuts of the 2 different Rebel Moon movies, and I just thought they were unwatchable, they were dreadful, they were boring. I feel like my greatest conclusion about Zack Snyder is that he has an incredible eye. He loves shooting those tableaus. He has incredible style. He has a truly alarming lack of imagination. And I feel like you can have all the style in the world, but if you don't have the imagination to kind of imbue your world with originality and heart and great characters, all the style in the world, it's not going to help you. But maybe I'm being too harsh on Zack Snyder, because there was definitely a few more movies that were worse than the Rebel Moon movies, like The Crow. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ. Just watch the original from, 1994, and you'll get all the Crow that you could ever ask for. And I love how the filmmakers who made the remake of The Crow were like, what this movie really needs is like 45 minutes of filler with the most boring love story ever conceived by human beings before we get to the action of The Crow. But anyway, avoid The Crow at all costs. Here.
This was our home. We lived here.
That was a pretty dreadful movie. Robert Zemeckis is another one of those directors like Zack Snyder who's run his reputation into the ground, because in the 80s, between like Romancing the Stone and Back to the Future and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and then leading all the way up to Forrest Gump, which was like his big, crowning achievement, I think he started loving the smell of his own farts after that, and he started to regard himself as a prestigious director. He hasn't had a hit since 2000 with Castaway. But here, I feel like here's one of the best examples of a director where he loves technology, he loves gimmicks, but he absolutely has no understanding of like what makes people tick or how to imbue a movie with heart and humanity. It's all technical wizardry, but no real story to get invested in. Speak No Evil, a remake which absolutely did not need to get made. It made money, so you could argue, well, from a business perspective, it made sense. But the original Speak No Evil was only 2 years old and far more hardcore, far more balls to the wall. The remake completely chickened out when it comes to every single creative decision made by the first movie. Like the first movie, if you're worried about something horrible happening to your children, the original Speak No Evil, it's a nightmare from which every single parent on the face of the earth will beg and plead where they can just finally wake up. And the new movie just turned into this stupid girl power action movie, and I just thought it was beneath contempt, to put it mildly. Another movie, maybe not beneath contempt, but pretty close, Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. This movie, alongside The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, are the perfect examples of how, if you're adapting Tolkien, either adapt the stories that he wrote or leave it alone. Like there's not a writer left on the planet that knows how to add to Tolkien. There was only one J.R.R. Tolkien. There will only ever be one J.R.R. Tolkien. And his son Christopher Tolkien did a great job of kind of assembling all of his notes so that we have all the material that we could ever ask for. But if you want to do Tolkien as a movie or a video game or animation or whatever, adapt the stories that he wrote, or just recognize he was a giant, the rest of us are insects, and we have no business contributing stories to his legendarium or his grand mythos. What else do we have here on the list? Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, yet another franchise extension that never needed to get made. I mean, we want to talk about a criminally unfunny movie that is trying to turn a kind of like a racy, edgy, balls-to-the-wall comedy from the early 80s into a family-friendly series of adventure movies. Frozen Empire was just a total fucking misfire. And the last movies on my Hall of Shame will be all 3 Sony Spider-Verse movies. I know that Venom The Last Dance made a little bit of money, or some money, but between Madam Web, Venom The Last Dance, and now Kraven the Hunter, I mean, Jesus Christ. My advice to Sony would be focus on making movies about everybody's favorite friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and his classic Hall of Fame rogues gallery of villains, and stop trying to create a shared universe out of movies about Spider-Man where Spider-Man never actually appears. But now that I've gotten some shit talking out of my system, let's slow down and sing the praises of some horror movies with my horror top 10. And I'm going to go in order of preference from number 1 down to number 10. But my favorite horror movies of 2024, and the first 4 of them are on my top 10 list, so I'm not going to go into great detail here, but Oddity, Nosferatu, The Substance, and Strange Darling. And A Strange Darling's more of a thriller than a horror movie, but putting it on the horror list. All 4 of those movies I'll be talking about in a few short minutes, but Terrifier 3. I think this is one of the most inspirational independent movie success stories of like the last decade, perhaps of the 21st century, where you have a director who has invented his own character, invented his own franchise over a series of shorts and like micro budget movies. Then he goes off and makes this movie after trying to sell off the rights to his character to anybody who might conceivably buy it. They went off and made the movie for a couple $1 million, and I think it's now grossed like $100 million worldwide or close to it. It is so inspiring, and I feel like Art the Clown, played by David Howard Thornton, and its creator, Damien Leone, they are horror superstars. Their contribution to the horror genre is as impactful and as exciting as any of the great characters from like the late 70s or early 80s. You know, characters like Freddy or Jason or Mike Myers or Pinhead or any of the characters that I grew up watching. But it's been a long time since we've seen somebody come along and then a new franchise, new series of stories, new character that a young horror freak who's like 15 years old in 2024 can call their own. So I hope they'll make a Terrifier 4 sooner rather than later, and then we'll see what the future might hold for Damien Leone. But I imagine that the future is bright for that young director.
Do you still say your prayers? Number ones. They scared me.
But rounding out the rest of my horror top 10, we've got Longlegs. That movie was just an absolute cultural phenomenon this last summer. The movie was made for $10 million. They marketed it for $10 million, and then it grossed well over $100. Yet another crazy success story within the horror genre. So high five to everybody at Neon who was involved, in particular Nicolas Cage, who is just delightfully insane, as well as Osgood Perkins, who's got yet another horror movie coming out like in 1 or 2 months. I think it's Anyway, I'm blanking now. I need to do some homework on what Osgood Perkins' next horror movie is, but it's right around the corner. I don't know if it'll be as big an event as Longlegs was, but obviously it's fun to have a kind of a brand name director now working within the horror genre, cranking out movies on a regular basis. A Late Night with the Devil would be my number 7. A Milk and Cereal, which is a movie that kind of flew under the radar for a lot of people, but it was just posted on YouTube. It wasn't released theatrically, but it just shows how if you're a young filmmaker and you're creative and you're full of ambition, you can just make your movie with your friends, post it on YouTube, and build your reputation that way. How many have I done so far? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll include Immaculate as my number 9. It wasn't as good as I hoped it would be, but Sydney Sweeney's obviously easy on the eyes, and like the last 20 or 30 minutes of Immaculate was pretty goddamn hardcore. And I'll include Heretic as my number 10 within the horror genre, but just because Hugh Grant was just so goddamn fantastic. And if I were to be charitable and include a few honorable mentions, Stop Motion is a cool horror movie that deserves a shout out. It actually made me scream out loud while watching it at home, but awe-inspiring stop motion with some legit scares. I saw the TV Glow had some great stylistic ingredients, but I hated the ending. What else? In a Violent Nature had a good gimmick, but I hated the ending. Never saw Cuckoo, and I feel a little guilty about that, but I probably should. And Alien Romulus, it's not an honorable mention for me, and I know a lot of people absolutely loved it and adored it and want to see more of it.
Something in the water.
What do you mean there's something in the water?
I don't know, there's just something in the fucking water.
But the more I thought about the movie, the more I soured on it when I realized everything about that movie that's good comes from Alien and Aliens. And it's like, all right, well, I'd rather just watch Alien and Aliens as opposed to basically watching the equivalent of like a cover band playing the golden oldies of one of your favorite bands from a long time ago. Like, I love Alien. I love Aliens. I don't need to see a cover band playing the hits, so to speak. I'd rather just watch a filmmaker. I mean, obviously, Fede Alvarez, wildly talented director, has a great eye, and he very lovingly kind of recreated the aesthetic, at least like in the first half of the movie, of the original Alien. But it's like Go off and create your own franchises, create your own characters. And I know that's easier said than done in the modern era. It's easier to do franchise extensions and get work for hire than to create something from scratch. But now that he's made Evil Dead and now that he's made Alien Romulus, I feel like he's got the reputation and the fan base where he needs to strike out on his own. All right, so we're starting to inch our way towards my official honorable mentions, but I do need to give a few shout-outs before we get there because I saw a few movies at festivals that are not technically in release yet, but I at least want to put them on people's radar. David Cronenberg's The Shrouds. I rank it about kind of halfway in his filmography, and I did a video on his career earlier this year, but that'll be coming out, I think, in the spring, but I caught it at the New York Film Festival. If you like Cronenberg, it's required viewing, but don't expect it to rearrange your top 5 or even your top 10 favorite David Cronenberg movies. But I also saw Secret Mall Apartment from director Jeremy Workman, edited by Paul Murphy. One of the best documentaries I've ever seen about the creative process, and one of the best documentaries I've ever seen when it comes to kind of resetting your notions about the permanence of art, or what is the value of permanence in art? Like, is like a work of art valuable because it hangs on a museum's wall for centuries, or is it great because it might exist for a few years and then it gets destroyed and goes away? Like, it was one of the few movies that's made me kind of question a lot of my assumptions. And I know Jeremy Workman, so I'm a little bit biased. However, I think I've seen the last 3 or 4 of his documentaries, and they keep getting better. Secret Mall Apartment is going to blow people's fucking minds once they finally get a chance to see it. All right, and I've got one final interruption before I get to my honorable mentions, because in 2024, we saw 3 movies come out for some aging giants, aging legends who probably won't be with us for much longer, but Clint Eastwood, Ridley Scott, and Woody Allen all released movies, and these guys were in their late 80s and early 90s now, and who knows how long they'll go, but like I've been following all their careers basically my entire life, and during my college years, like, you know, my peak years of like true movie insanity, I was just like, you know, living off a steady diet of movies by all of them and or featuring them. But Clint Eastwood had Juror Number 2, which is actually pretty goddamn good courtroom drama. Ridley Scott had Gladiator 2. I think, as I said in my review, like everything that's an A in the first one was like a B or B minus in the second one. But he still made a movie in his late 80s for like $400 million. And Woody Allen's Coup de Chance, I don't speak French. It means like stroke of luck or stroke of fortune. It's a romantic comedy / thriller, all in French, because in France he can still make movies. He's not persona non grata there. And for anybody who's got I guess antagonism towards Woody Allen, I would just steer you toward his book Apropos of Nothing, where he at least gets to offer his side of the facts that have made him so radioactive within some communities in Hollywood these days. But if you're going to criticize him, at least know both sides of all the various scandals related to Woody Allen. But all 3 of these directors, like, do I prefer their earlier movies? Of course. Like Clint Eastwood, his first movie he directed, Play Misty for me, fucking Hall of Fame thriller. I really like Outlaw Josie Wales, Unforgiven, obviously, but he's directed a ton of good stuff like Mystic River. But Ridley Scott, I mean, Alien and Blade Runner and Gladiator and, you know, like Black Rain and Thelma and Louise. I mean, he's got a ton of good stuff. Or Legend. And with Woody, basically from the late 60s to the late 90s, he made a movie every goddamn year. He's basically made a movie every single year for the last like 50 plus years, but throughout the late 60s to the late 90s, like half of them were astonishingly good, or like some of the all-time funniest movies I've ever seen, or great romantic comedies. Like, just going in order from the late 60s, What's Up Tiger Lily, Take the Money and Run, Bananas, Sleeper, Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex but Afraid to Ask, Love and Death, Annie Hall, Manhattan, Interior, Stardust Memories. This is where my memory starts getting a little more choppy. Midsummer Night's Sex Comedy, Zelig, Broadway Danny Rose, Radio Days, Hannah and Her Sisters. I mean, there's so many goddamn good ones. I guess I'll skip ahead a bit just to save some time. But movies like Deconstructing Harry or Crimes and Misdemeanors. I mean, there's so many goddamn good ones. So once again, do your own homework, come to your own conclusions, but if you want to see his latest movie, Coup de Chance, is worth a look. It was shot by Vittorio Storaro, but I think now with all that out of the way, I think I'm ready for my official honorable mentions. And as I mentioned before at the beginning of the video, you're only eligible to be an honorable mention if you had a legit chance of being actually in the top 10, or movies that might have been on the top 10 list at one point, but then slipped off because it was kind of an overcrowded year. Like, very few standout amazing movies, but a lot of movies that were pretty good. But let's start with Richard Linklater's Hitman. I saw it at the New York Film Festival in the fall of 2023. Then it came out in 2024 on Netflix. But this is proof that not all Netflix movies are pure ass. Occasionally there's some good ones. But Netflix, their biggest problem is that they're not filmmaker friendly. Filmmakers want to have their movies play in front of an audience. They want to sell tickets. When you play in a theater, you just become part of the culture. You just have... There's a certain, tactile stickiness or permanence to a movie that's had a big theatrical run. Also, just the marketing campaign associated with it that just makes it stick in people's memories. Movies that only have a digital release just tend to wash on by, just like content. So I feel like if Hitman had had a big, robust theatrical release, it would have been an absolute smash. Because the stars, Glenn Powell and Adria Arjona, have more sex appeal and more chemistry than any two stars alive. It's so goddamn funny, so goddamn sexy, and I feel like the fact that Hitman is not better known is the perfect example of why filmmakers should not sell their movies to Netflix unless they have to. I know that when people were considering buying it, Netflix was willing to pay above and beyond what anybody else was willing to pay for it, and that's why they got it. But it just mystifies me as to why Netflix doesn't see the value in giving movies a theatrical release. But maybe if they get to a point where filmmakers are unwilling to sell their movies to Netflix at any price because they value the theatrical experience that much, maybe then Netflix will modify their ways. But Hitman, I fucking loved it.
Ooh, cheese balls over here.
What are you doing?
You want one?
No, it looks totally disgusting.
Cheese balls.
But my next honorable mention is a movie which I think kind of slipped through the cracks for a variety of reasons, but The Apprentice from director Ali Abbasi, starring Sebastian Stan and Jeremy Strong. I think one of the reasons this movie kind of slipped through the cracks is that people on the right thought it was too critical of Donald Trump, and people on the left didn't want to watch a movie about Donald Trump. And so what you're left with is like the curious centrists or moderate that were willing to give it a chance. And I only saw this because my friend Ronald Meyer told me that the performances were incredible. But as I was watching it, I was like, God damn, this movie should have been a fucking smash. In an election year, of course, a movie about the origin story of Donald Trump and his relationship with the infamous Roy M. Cohn should have been an absolute smash. But the reason I finally saw it, I saw some news about how there was some sort of roundtable discussion for actors from 2024 that some actors didn't want to participate because Sebastian Stan was going to be there, and they disapproved of the fact that he had played Donald Trump. And I'm like I don't care if you're the world's most beloved president or the world's most hated president. It's fair game for dramatic interpretations and that sort of thing. And I thought this movie, if you're interested in late 70s, early 80s New York and how Donald got his career going, I think you'll find it absolutely riveting. Whether you just completely fucking despise him or worship at the altar of him, The Apprentice is 100% worth seeing. I was absolutely floored by how entertaining it was. But my next honorable mention is Conclave, a movie which I thoroughly enjoyed. I thought Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and John Lithgow just knocked it out of the park, as did director Edward Berger. And what it reminded me of was that great heyday of the 80s and 90s where really trashy, lurid, international best-selling fiction would be adapted by mainstream directors and turned into mainstream entertainment. And the fact that this movie did make money and actually successfully got the adult audience back to the theater shows that you can still do it. The movie biz doesn't need to exclusively consist of, animation for children and or the 15th interpretation of a franchise that we've all gotten far too familiar with over the last 40 or 50 years. You actually can just take cool, riveting thrillers right off the rack, shove them in the camera, make glorious entertainment. So yeah, Conclave, high five to Conclave. I'm thrilled this movie did successfully find an audience, because there is an audience for smart entertainment that is too often underserved. And my next two honorable mentions, I really struggled with as to whether or not I should include them in the top 10 or not. The number 10 or number 9 or number 8 slots on my list were, I had to do a lot of soul searching, but I'm going to include Sasquatch Sunset as an honorable mention. And this movie definitely deserved to find a much wider audience earlier this year. But what it reminded me of was the great heyday of indie cinema in the 90s, where filmmakers would come out of the blue with some of the craziest, most deranged, kind of thought-provoking comedies or satires that you've ever seen. And Sasquatch Sunset is this bittersweet movie about the final days of this clan of Sasquatch roaming the West. But it will make you howl, it will make you clutch your pearls, all that good stuff. Definitely check out Sasquatch Sunset just to see Jesse Eisenberg and Riley Keough throwing down as Big Feet. And my last official honorable mention is Challengers from director Luca Guadagnino, a movie which very nearly made my top 10. I thought throughout the entire year it definitely was going to make my top 10, but the list just got full. I think between the two movies that Luca Guadagnino released in 2024, Challengers and Queer, I think Challengers is much more stylish, much more entertaining, much more riveting. There are not a lot of great movies out there about tennis apart from Strangers on a Train, and tennis is only a small part of that, so it's nice to finally have a cool, sexy, entertaining movie about the wonderful world of tennis. But for my very last honorable mention, we're going to have a special appearance by my friend Becky Deanna, who absolutely loves and adores the movie The Beast. And she wanted to do a video about The Beast, but I kind of missed my window because I missed the initial release. But she's seen it like 7 or 8 times, and I just felt like she is so rabid in her enthusiasm for the movie. I just felt like I needed to give her a platform on this Best of the Year video just to speak her piece. And sadly, there's a little bit of a lag issue. Even though we both tested our latency and we're testing our upload speed and blah, 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 there was a little bit of a problem with StreamYard where it's just slightly out of sync here and there, but I think the conversation went fantastic. And it's always a pleasure and a privilege talking about flicks with Becky Deanna. So without further ado, here is the great Becky Deanna speaking her piece about The Beast. But it's now time to switch gears from apocalyptic prestige horror over to the wonderful world of art house cinema. So yeah, tell me all about La Bête, aka The Beast, from Bertrand Bonello.
Yeah, so I just want to say I'm so happy you let me talk about this movie because I became sort of obsessed with it this year. And I can't remember the last time that the last time I got really obsessed with a movie, I think was 2001 with Amelie. I saw Amelie, I think 5 times in the theater. And then I think before that, it was 1991 with Terminator 2. That was my favorite film of all time. I saw that film, I think, like 20 times in like 1 year. And I think like 3 times in the theater and more. What's up?
Oh, nothing. I'm just listening.
Oh, I thought it was I thought I was lagging again. Sorry.
Well, we're getting a little bit of lag, but I think it's nothing that's going to end the recording. So just because for me, I'm in sync as I'm speaking.
Yeah, I'm in sync when I'm speaking. I think I was just like, I didn't know if you were. So you kind of seem like you're off, but if it's.
Oh, I was just sitting still. I wasn't frozen at all.
Okay.
I was just thinking real hard.
Okay. No. So anyway, back to I've seen this movie. I actually never got to see it in the theater. I saw it in. My friend saw it in April, so it was out in the theaters for like a week or 2, maybe. And I didn't check it out. And I had a friend in June that really knows my film taste, and he and I talk about movies all the time. We were just catching up, texting about movies, and he said. That he got to see this movie in the theater in April and it floored him and he thought I would love it. And he's like, you should check it out. And so I looked and it actually was streaming. It was one of those, it was $20 to rent it. So I was like, you know what? I really want to see this. He says it's great. So I'm going to pay $20 to see it. I saw it and loved it. And especially the ending really got to me. And I kept thinking about it for a few days. And I just I have to see this movie again. So I paid another $20 because it had already expired after 2 days to watch it again. And then I think a few weeks later, maybe a month later, it went on Criterion streaming. And then now I can't stop watching it. I've seen it 7 times total. And I'm at the point where I've called it so many things. I've called it cinematic heroin. I've talked about how
I'm not frozen. And I'll try to, I'll start playing little mind games with you, and assuming certain poses, and you'll have
what
to
were
guess.
you saying? Were you saying something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, but for people who might not have seen it yet or might not be on the radar, give the pitch. What's the premise? What's it all
Yeah,
about?
sorry. What I wanted just to say how much I love this movie and that why I've seen it multiple times. But yes, the premise is that this is a film that takes place in the future. It really has 3 different time periods, but it starts off in 2044, and at that point, it is AI has sort of succeeded. It's sort of taken over. And really humans have to have sort of menial jobs. In order for humans to have jobs are rewarding and have responsibility, they're being asked to go through a purification process, which essentially removes your effects. And what effects means is what they call that is like emotions. Because AI believes that in order to do really well at really the jobs that require responsibility and are rewarding, you really can't have your emotions affect your thought process and your work. And they feel like being frustrated about your hours or having things from your outside life affect you will affect your performance. So in order to get the really great jobs, you have to go through this purification process to remove these. And what they're saying, it's not really removing your emotions. It's just making things just feel more, you feel things more serenely, but it really is removing your emotions. And what the purification process involves is you go through past lives and you realize it kind of takes away, like you get to see your past lives and why you have these effects. It's one of the things that I love about it is there's a theory I heard years ago, which is really fun. And I like how this film explores it, is that it says that if there are things, irrational fears you have, like maybe you have a fear of heights or a fear of flying or of spiders or a fear of certain things you're not actually quite sure of, or you anxieties about things, you're not really sure why you feel that way. The premise, the theory is that it's possible that maybe in a past life you died in a plane crash or something really traumatic happened or something like that. And that's why in your current life you feel a certain way. And the movie sort of explores that.
I'm afraid of sea monsters, which don't really exist, but for whatever reason they terrify me. How would you apply that theory to my irrational fear? There's a I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I went down a YouTube rabbit hole. There is a term called like thessalafia or something like that, where people who are afraid of being helpless underwater, and people make these little YouTube shorts with like big giant sea monsters preying upon that fear. And I went through like several hours of like white knuckle terror watching these. I was like, all right, so other people share this irrational fear, but there are no sea monsters to my knowledge. So how would you explain my deep rooted anxiety over these leviathans?
I mean, maybe back in the 1600s in a past life, there was a sea monster no longer exists that got to you or something. But that's what I think is fascinating about this premise, is that it could be that maybe the reason why you can't swim or you're afraid of swimming or something like that is because maybe you drowned or you had a drowning experience. I love this theory. And so what it is the story is called The Beast, and the beast essentially is this existential fear that something's going to come into your life and a catastrophe or some sort that's going to stop you from experiencing true happiness or joy. And so what this character Léa Seydoux does, she goes through this purification process, which really goes through past lives. And what she realizes is that she's always afraid of like that something's going to come in and take away her happiness. And you get to see these 3 sequences of past lives, or actually 2 past lives. And you see why she feels that way, why she feels like has afraid of falling in love or afraid that something's going to happen to her. But the beast essentially can be anything. It could be technology. It could be some sort of catastrophe. It's something that will eliminate the fear of something's that's going to come and destroy something. And a lot of people feel that way in general, that they're afraid to fall in love, or they're afraid that something, I have this great job and I know something's going to happen and make it, that something's going to mess it up for themselves. And some people protect themselves by, like they just protect themselves by not getting too invested. But I love this.
I would just say paranoia will destroy you. So.
Yeah, well, that's the essential premise of The Beast, and that's what The Beast is this existential fear that something will come. What I love about this film is that it's very ambitious, and it has a sequence in 1910, which explores the Great Floods of Paris. It goes through 2014, which is sort of modern day, although, obviously that was 10 years ago, but it's more modern day. And then it goes to 2044, which is where Léa Seydoux is in this movie at the beginning and then sort of at the end, and where she's going through this purification process. One of the things that's interesting, and as you see through multiple movies, is in the 1910 version, she already has this fear of the beast, that something's going to come in and stop her from happiness. And what you realize when you see the movie, I think again multiple times, is clearly something must have happened to her in a past life before 1910, because she already has this fear in 1910. So they're not showing all of her past lives, but in this movie, it explores these past lives. But what I love
clearly at one point she saw Last Year at Marienbad, because all those flashbacks from the period are feel like you could call it a loving homage or a blatant ripoff of Alan Renee's Last Year at Marienbad. But that whole idea of bumping into somebody who claims that they know you, but they don't quite remember from when, I was like, I've seen this movie, and I know that Bertrand Bonello has seen this movie, but have you seen Last Year at Marienbad?
No, but it's not like he says that's actually not totally accurate. Like when she sees him, that she has met him before. She's met him younger. She just couldn't remember exactly what city it is. It's not like she's like not.
But the way those scenes are staged and the way they're shot, once again, loving homage. But one thing I do want to do, I want to share one brief clip. I tried to upload the trailer. That didn't work. I tried uploading a part of the trailer. That didn't work. The only thing YouTube would allow me to share is this brief little snippet, but it does have the scream, which gives you an idea of the kind of the abstract expression of the metaphysical fear of the beast.
Fermez vos yeux.
And that is all I'm allowed to share from the beast. But every time I tried to upload anything and say it is blocked in the following countries, I was like, well, what the fuck's going on? So there are a lot of countries out there that are, have an antagonism toward the beast.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is the US trailer. I don't love sharing that trailer because it's very set up like it's a horror film. There are like the 2014 section of this film. There's a lot of slasher movie vibes to it, and I love it. One of the things that I love about this movie is that it's a mix of a million different genres. It's science fiction, it's a romance, it's a noir, it's a slasher film.
It's a behind the scenes look at making movies with all the
it's a period drama, techno thriller. It's essentially like it's a bunch of different genres, and I think it beautifully masters each one. And it's really ambitious. And I think that's the thing too that's interesting about this movie is that the first time I think you see it, there's so much stuff going on, and you're like, wait, why is it this way? And why is this? And what's that? And then it kind of pieces it together at the end. And I could see people being more flummoxed maybe with the whole experience. And that's why I'm not saying you have to see it multiple times, but what I want to say as someone who has seen this movie 7 times is this movie is so precise. And I've read a lot of interviews with Bonello talking about this movie. There is nothing in this movie that he didn't specifically do. He's done everything. He wrote, directed, composed all the music. And actually even the music, like he would write a scene and then after that, he would write the music for that scene. And he would stop and like come up with the music for that scene. And if there's a song in the movie that isn't, that he didn't write, that composed, he put it in there. He put it in there for a reason. There's a reason why it's in there. The reason,
like the club scene in 1972.
Yeah, and then in the Evergreen, there's a song called Evergreen that's just done in 2014, and she's watching karaoke, and I could see in the watching the movie like, what is this movie? Why is the song here? And it really plays into in the end.
It's the most moving part of the movie, in my opinion, when she's kind of crying and singing along. I mean, because the person singing is a little bit tone deaf and can't quite hit the right notes, but in spite of that, she's being incredibly moved by the experience. So yeah,
and that's the thing. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, Léa Seydoux. I mean, honestly, I could watch a movie where she just sits by a fire and reads from the phone book. She's one of my favorite actors working today, but I think this is the 3rd time she's worked with Bonello, and they've obviously got a great rapport as actress and filmmaker.
Yeah, and he wrote this movie for her. He said he didn't know what he was going to do if she couldn't be in it because she sort of has this timeless look. She can be, and she's got like, she could be modern and she could be timeless. And he really felt like she was perfect for this movie. And, but yeah, one of the things, like I said, throughout the movie is actors, the characters will act a certain way and you're like, not quite sure, like in the 2014 section, which is sort of probably the most controversial section. It takes one of the characters is George McKay, who's the other key character in the film. He plays a character named Louis in every timeline.
There it is, Louis Lewansky.
Louis Lewansky, yes. Yeah. And Léa Seydoux is a character named Gabrielle. But there's a sequence in the 2014 sequence where George McKay's character is an incel character, is actually based on a real a guy who was an incel, and actually a lot of the recordings a lot of the dialogue that he says is actually taken from real YouTube videos. This person, I think his name is me see. I have
his online manifestos about
Yeah,
how he
what
kill
is-
women because they didn't like him.
Yes, I don't remember his. I don't know. Can't remember his name right now. But Elliot Rodger is the name of the incel. So he actually these really chilling videos he put online on YouTube. So he actually takes exact dialogue from those videos. Are really straight on and they're kind of like crazy. But the 2014 section was interesting. Is there's a scene where there's an earthquake in the middle sequence, and Lea Seydoux character walks outside and she's drawn to this character, which is George McKay's character. And I think if you're kind of confused, like, why would she be drawn to this guy? And he's kind of creepy, and why is she walking away with him? But it's because, again, for some reason, because she doesn't know because her past lives, is that this is the great love of her life. And no matter who he is and when any timeline, she's always drawn to him. There's a sequence in the beginning of the movie where she runs into him because he's lost and they're in the same purification center, and he asked her for directions, and she immediately, you see her whole face soften. Like, she doesn't know why. She immediately feels like a warm feeling when she's around him, but it's because she's loved him in the past.
It also helps that
lives.
he's devilishly handsome, which as we were talking about before we started recording. I think my one criticism of this movie is I thought he was miscast as the incel, because as I so indelicately phrased it, I think, he could sleep in a cow pasture covered in shit and people still want to bone him and line up for the privilege. So I don't buy him as an involuntary celibate in any way, shape, or form. Talking about how he's never kissed a girl. And he's using this really unusual accent, which doesn't exist in North America. And so I find it incredibly distracting and jarring. And maybe he was miscast, or maybe I'm just not understanding their intentions. But I think that, for me, I don't find it to be a controversial part of the movie. I find it just to be an ineffective part of the movie, where the rest of the movie is wildly effective. Like the underwater escape scene is pure magic, and I love that. And the green screen sequences, Lea Seydoux those might be the best green screen sequences ever filmed, and made me think, what if Disney and all these giant corporations just took the special effects out of their movies and we just got to see the actual green screen footage? It might be more interesting than some of these fucking abominations that get released in the multiplex, or at least it would be more interesting if you have Lea Seydoux doing the performance. But my favorite scene of the movie might be that opening bit where, when they say action, you believe that the danger is all around her just because she's selling with her eyes. But it also helps that Lea Seydoux has incredibly expressive eyes. So
and that scene, they refer, it's actually in the 2014 the 2014 sequence, they call back to it. The thing about this film, which is fascinating, is that they, again, like I said, on multiple viewings, everything is precise when you're like, wait, why is this happening? And why is this happening? There are things, like I said, I've seen this movie 7 times. I probably will see it more because I'm obsessed with it. I'm literally, like, at this point, just injected into my veins because I'm so obsessed with this film. But there are so many things that are done on purpose, of like why he's chosen certain things and why things play out, like the pigeon and things like that, where you're like, oh, that's interesting. Why is that? For me, it just becomes more and more profound with each watch. There are things that I discover and learn through each one. So nothing, I don't think, some people, when they look at it, they're like, oh, this is just this like crazy ambitious film. And like, there's too much stuff, and some stuff works and some stuff isn't, and it's sloppy and this and that. That's some of the criticisms, but a lot of people have been completely floored by it. And it's actually interesting because it's made several top 10 lists. And one of the things that I love is the guy that loved it for the RogerEbert.com, a whole host of Chicago writers attribute to that top 10 list. He had said that when he saw it at the New York Film Festival, that he sort of had a mixed reaction to it. He was like, but then he said he kept thinking about it, and he ended up watching it multiple times, and it's just continued to grow and grow in his estimation. And that's sort of with me, it's like I kind of become more obsessed with it as I keep watching it, because there's so many layers to it. And also just filmmaking wise, what I love is that Bonello, 1910 is shot in 35 millimeter, and then 2014 and 2044 is shot digitally, so it's more cold and like sharp. And then also he also uses different filmmaking techniques. Like you see footage through an iPhone 11, like he uses iPhone 11 to film. You see stuff through surveillance footage. He uses the camera footage for that, or computer screens. So there's so many different things. And another amazing thing I love about this film is that, and this is not giving anything away, that the film ends with a QR code. And that wasn't in the script. That's something that Vanello wrote and wanted something really cold to explain the whole AI and how AI is taking over.
Did you test it with your phone to see where it leads?
I did. Did you?
I did not know.
Oh, it's great. Actually, I highly recommend it if you do see the movie. Scan
it's available,
QR
on the
code.
Criterion channel. So if people have a Criterion subscription, they can hunt it down.
When you scan the QR code, it's the whole credit sequence, and then there's actually like sort of like an Easter egg in the credit sequence.
Okay.
So it's pretty cool. It's interesting to watch, but But
my advice for people would be, if they are going to check it out, they're going to have to resist the temptation of taking breaks. I feel like this movie, if you're watching it at home, it gives you a lot of off ramps when you're watching it. Anytime it changes periods or kind of like resets with a new section of the story, I think a lot of people will be compelled to say, oh, now it's time to make a sandwich, or now it's time to go to the bathroom. I think if you were to see it in the theater, and sadly, a lot of us will never have that opportunity, it would force you to surrender over to the rhythms and the structure of the movie. And I think if you watch it in a piece, because the first time I watched it, I did watch it in more or less kind of a piecemeal fashion. I think that it kind of breaks the movie. People have to, it's a 2.5 hour movie. Do your best to try to watch it all in one sitting, because I think it will kind of break the spell if you take those off ramps as they present themselves.
Yeah, I agree, because I don't think I would see the 1910 version and then take a break, because it really does. It's really just more meaningful seeing it all at once.
Well, any final words about La Bête? Have you seen the Valerian Borowczyk movie from 1975, which I covered with Martin Kessler and Dave Eves a couple of years ago?
Is that something that you think that I would love, because I love this movie?
No, I think you would be utterly repulsed by it. It's it's a softcore French erotica movie about this local legend of this beast or Bigfoot that lives in the backyard that makes love to women, and it's just utterly repugnant in a lot of ways. But for people who like to go to the strange side with their softcore pornography, La Bête, the original, is worth hunting down. I mean, Borowczyk made a lot of movies, all of which are kind of controversial in nature, but for people who enjoy a little eroticism in their movies, Valerian Borowczyk, check out. Well, actually, let me see which episode of Wrong Reel it was. Wrong Reel. I remember like Dave Eves didn't talk to me for like a year after I had him on that. He's like, "Why'd you invite me to this one?" I was like, "I thought you would like it." Wrong Reel. Really? Wrong Reel 455. Valerian Borowczyk and Walking.
I listened to it because I've listened to every episode, but I haven't seen. I don't remember that one. I don't think I saw the movie after.
Wrong Reel 455. Hunt it down.
I think there's just two things specifically I wanted to mention about that I did. One of them is that there is one criticism of this movie that they feel like some people have said that they wish that the movie had taken place further in the future, that they felt like 2044 is too close. One thing is Bonello distinctly chose the film to be 20 years in the future because he thought it was something that we could actually imagine what it could be like. And instead of making it like ultra modern or post-apocalyptic, he liked that he sort of took things away from, subtracted. Like he said that like there are no more cars and no internet, no social media. It's more empty and minimalist. And so he sort of did that so it could be more relatable, that could be a possible future, that AI succeeded and it's sort of cold. So there's a reason for it. Again, there's like a reason for everything. It's not like this just sloppy and everything.
A method to his madness.
Yeah, exactly. And so anyway, I know if you do see it and you're like, oh, it'd be interesting, or I don't know if I got this and that, whatever. I'd love to talk to you about it. I honestly feel like this is a film. I think this is like a deck. I feel like this film will be taught in film classes one day. I think it's that good, and I think it will reveal itself to be even more profound. And I honestly, I think it's like a decade-defining film. I do. I honestly, I think it's a masterpiece, and it's been a long time since a film has had this much of an effect on me. I just think it's magnificent, and it's unlike anything I've ever seen. And I just think it's so profound. And then one of the other things, the last thing is that I didn't mention, is the ending is just amazing. Like it's the last 6 minutes of this movie is
sticks the landing. Yeah.
It's a gut punch of an ending. And because I have it streaming on Criterion, sometimes I legit, before I go to bed at night, I queue up the last 6 minutes of the movie and I watch it. And there's a scene, I'm not giving anything away, at the last 6-minute mark where Léa Seydoux's character is walking up a flight of stairs. And when I see that happening, I know the ending's about to happen. And I'm like, let's effing go. Like, it's such a great ending that I'll just watch it just for the ending because it's so amazing. And I didn't really say a lot about George McKay, and you said how dreamy. Well, you didn't say he was dreamy, but you were saying, I think he's dreamy.
I think I said devilishly handsome, but
yes.
That was a Freudian slip on your part if you do find him dreamy.
I do find him dreamy. You know what the thing is? That's because the thing I've seen this movie so many times is that he has these age lines around his eyes and his mouth, and I'm kind of obsessed with them because.
Now, do you speak any French, and are you impressed by the fact that he learned French for the movie?
I am. I took French in high school, but I'm not fluent in it. It is really impressive. He said he didn't know a word of French, but he wanted to be able to act in French and not do it phonetically, so he actually learned it. But one of the things Spinello did is he had cast another actor, Gaspar Anouilh, I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, who died tragically in a ski accident, so he had to recast it, and he didn't want to recast it with another French actor because he's afraid there'd be comparisons, so he did cast George McKay, and he did not rewrite, but the first section, he made it in half English, half French, for George McKay in the 1910 sequence. And then the middle part, I think, is English. I don't know if it was always supposed to be English, but either way, I think George McKay is great. And there's small things, again, because I've seen the movie so many times. There's little things that George McKay does that I absolutely love. They have such good chemistry too. There's a sequence in the beginning, like I said, where they run into each other at the purification center and they don't really know each other. And he's sort of like, I'm lost. And she's like, in life or in the building? And he's like, I guess both. And it's really sweet and cute. And there's a scene near the end, like I said, she's that last 6 minutes, there's a sequence where she's moving towards him and she asks, and he's kind of looking at her like really sweetly, like, wait, why is she walking towards me? And it's because she's going to ask him to dance. And that's just the way he looks at her. It's so it's just. Well,
it sounds like if Becky Deanna had been a character in this movie, he would not have remained an involuntary celibate for long. His problems would have been solved.
He's wonderful in this movie. That's true. A little bit, yes.
All right,
but,
we're going to play a little game to wrap up this segment because we're recording this about like a week and a half before I'm actually going to record my top 10 videos. So as of this point where we're recording, I've not yet seen A Complete Unknown, and I've not yet seen The Brutalist, and I've not yet seen Baby Girl, all of which I'll see before I do my final list. But I'm going to give you some of the movies that are on my contenders for top 10 right now, and you're going to tell me which one has got to go. That's got to be crossed off. So I want you to put on your most rigorous, mean-spirited film criticism hat and tell me which of these movies is a total stinker. So here are my contenders as they stand.
I was saying this about movies that you love?
Yeah, well, I'm going to give you a chance. Because I threw a few daggers at the beast, you're going to get to throw a dagger at something that I like. So, fair is fair. So these are my contenders for my top 10 right now. It's a few more than 10, but we'll slowly whittle down the list. But Nosferatu, Anora, Conclave, The Substance, Long Legs, Hitman, Dune Part 2, Sasquatch Sunset, Challengers, Furiosa, Mad Max Saga, Strange Darling, Terrifier 3, Oddity, and my number one, Made in England, the films of Powell and Pressburger. If you had to take one of those off the list, which one's it going to be?
Well, there's a few I think there's 2 or 3 I haven't seen. I haven't seen Nosferatu. I cannot wait for Nosferatu. I'm sure I'm going to love it. I haven't seen that Sasquatch film.
It's good.
Yeah. But that's a great list. I actually really agree with you on most of those. I love a lot of those movies. Oddity I saw because of you. I think it's going to make at least my honorable mention. It's definitely going to make my top 10. I loved it. I thought Long Legs was great. This is a great year for horror. I would say this is controversial, but
be controversial. That's why we're here.
I did love Dune 2, and I know a lot of people love this movie. And maybe this is what I'm telling people how they need to rewatch The Beast. If maybe you had mixed
Don't
things
apologize.
About it.
It's going to make my top 10, so I will make a passionate defense for it later on. So offer an opposing view. What about the movie was lame to you?
I didn't think it was lame. I thought it was.
Or I would just put words in your mouth and just start making up criticisms.
I thought it was so boring. I just thought it was excruciatingly boring. And I just literally, I remember, I think you said in your review, there was a guy next to you that was playing with his cup, a cup or something. And you were like, he clearly wasn't as into it because he kept playing with his cup. I remember in your YouTube video.
Yeah, if you're playing with something like a fucking 5-year-old, well, then clearly, you've got other things on your mind.
I was like real restless during Dune 2. It's just, it's a beautiful looking film. I just didn't think, I'm not, and again, I think it must have been very true to the book. I just don't think these characters are that compelling. It's just not for me. But that's just really, it's just not for me. I'm not saying it's not a good movie. It's
take a stand, Becky.
It's not going to be in my honorable
Invite
mentions.
some online hate.
Yeah. So I'm sure, sorry if you hate me, but it's not going on honorable mention or top 10 for me. I didn't love this movie.
All right. That's what I was looking for. I knew there'd be one on there where you're like,
it's pretty, but it's like, I don't know. And Powell Pressburger sounds amazing. I haven't seen, what is this movie?
It's a documentary. It's basically another essay movie by Martin Scorsese. He didn't direct it. He did a personal journey through American filmmaking, which he didn't direct that either, but it's basically him walking us through all of his favorite obscure American movies from the past. He also did one for, what was it? Voyage to Italy. He did one about Italian films as well. This is his love song to the films of Powell and Pressburger. So it's just the camera on Scorsese's face, and he walks you through their entire career with highlights from all the movies. So if you like Powell and Pressburger, and I know you're a fan of A Matter of Life and Death, aka Stairway to Heaven, it is a documentary that will make you weep.
Wait, so where do you see this movie?
Yeah, anywhere. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's something
on the interwebs.
Oh, I have to check it out. But yeah, I think all of the movies you said were amazing. There's some movies that I don't love as much. Like I liked Anora. I wasn't over the moon. A lot of people thought I'd be over the moon about it. I think it's because I love Red Rocket more, but that shouldn't be a real criticism.
What if George McKay had been in Anora? I gotcha. I found you. What's the name of the guy from Becky's creator?
Oh, Vincent Spotto.
Yeah.
Is he
your new Vincent?
I think he might be my new Vincent. Yeah. I actually.
Right. He's only like 32, so you can look forward to watching him in movies for a long time.
I know. I have so much time to watch him, and look, he already has these age lines. They're probably going to get even more
He'll
as he
become
gets older.
more mysterious and handsome as he goes.
Yeah, he's quite affecting in The Beast. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Becky, where can people find you online if they either want to sing the praises of the Beast or tear you down for your hot take on Dune Part 2?
I'm not criticizing anybody for liking Dune 2. It just wasn't for me. You can find me on Twitter at Hollywood Minotaur. You can find me on Blue Sky at Hollywood Minotaur. And you can find me on on Letterboxd under Hollywood Minotaur. On Hollywood Minotaur on all the social medias. You can find me on there. And then if you Google my name, I have a website, melissabeckydeanna.com. It has all my top 10 lists from the past, I think 15, 20 years. So I will be posting it on New Year's Eve, my top 10 list. So if you want to see what I believe are the top 10 films, at this point, there's 10 days to go for the end of the year. I highly doubt, even though I haven't seen The Brutalist, I'm seeing it this Friday at 70 millimeter at the Vista, and I'm seeing a bunch of other Nosferatu, also a bunch of other movies. I can't imagine another movie is going to take the place of The Beast as my favorite film of the year. So check out my top 10 list. And then I'm wearing, I don't know if you know, my Star Trek holiday sweater, and I have my Trekmas tree behind me, which has got my Star Trek tree topper and 58 Star Trek ornaments. So if you'd like to talk about Star Trek, because I'm obsessed, or The Beast,
or the upcoming abomination known as Section 31 coming in January. But I've got a present to add underneath tree of yours. Boom from the great Tony Stella, his Terminator print. I've got it ready to rock. I need to put it in the mail for you, but you can put it under the tree. But a little sneak peek of what I got coming your way in the not so distant future. And also, now that you've got your home setup all ready to rock, I think it's a foregone conclusion that you need to set up a YouTube channel of your own just called The Hollywood Minotaur. When can we expect a YouTube channel just called Hollywood Minotaur? I think you've already got the best name for a channel possible.
Oh, you think so?
I'm giving you $1 million ideas.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if a lot of people know, but Minotaur is because if anyone knows, I'm obsessed with Radiohead. It's the symbol of their Amnesiac album, which is one of my favorite albums from Radiohead. So there's a Radiohead tie-in with Minotaur. But yeah, that's
all right. So Greek mythology trivia.
Yeah.
Who
Oh God,
killed-
I don't know.
who killed the Minotaur in Greek mythology?
I don't know. I don't know. You know so much about everything that I don't know about, Jamie. You know everything.
Theseus. He's one of the great heroes.
All right.
Theseus. He is the slayer of the Minotaur.
Thank you. I do want to say, first of all, that gift is extraordinary. The Terminator Tony Stella print. Tony Stella is just an extraordinary artist, and it's very exciting. And I see that Kyle Reese is in it too, and it's very exciting. And thank you so much. It's really really sweet of you to do that for me. But also, this is probably the best gift you could have given me, Jamie, is that I'm obsessed with this movie and I wanted to talk about it on a video of some sort. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to gush about this channel.
Any topic, anytime, you just tell me, and we'll turn on the recording devices and let her rip.
Yeah, and this, I've said this before already, but like I said, this film is just, I just think it's magnificent. And there's somebody on Twitter wrote a few months ago about how they felt like in 10 years somebody's going to look back. I think her name is Hollisback on Twitter, but she wrote that people will look back and go, damn, none of you all saw this movie. And I really do believe this is a film that's going to stand the test of time, that maybe you didn't love it right now, but in 20 years you're going to be like, this I wasn't ready for this movie right now. And if you haven't seen it, check it out. I know a lot
or
of
there'll
people,
be all the posers who say they liked it all along. I always was a fan.
I always loved it. What?
Yeah.
Yes. But there are it's made a lot of top 10 lists, which is exciting. Like I said, it's made Roger Ebert. It's made
the only
Slant
top
Magazine.
10 list that matters is the Hollywood Minotaur top 10. So fuck all those other posters.
Yeah, right. And it's number one on mine. So anyway, check it out. And thank you, Jamie, for allowing me to talk about it.
My pleasure. All right, so we've arrived at my official top 10 list, and at this point, I've read enough lists and I've listened to enough commentary by other people on their channels and that sort of thing to know that there are certain movies which are popping up on other people's lists pretty routinely, which I've not seen. So I'm just going to acknowledge I've not seen All We Imagine Us Light. I've not seen Wild Robot. I tried. I just can't do it. I've not seen Janet Planet. I've not seen Nickel Boys. I've not seen My Old Ass. I've not seen Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World, even though Bret Easton Ellis has been going backwards and forwards about it. I've not seen Emilia Perez, and I've not seen La Chimera, or however you pronounce it. Those are movies that I keep seeing pop up on other people's lists. I missed them. I'm sorry, not sorry. Anyway, I've seen too many movies this year. I'm just not going to watch those movies. I'm just going to let them wash on by. And who knows, if those filmmakers end up making other movies in the future that pop up on my radar, then I'll probably circle back and watch those older movies. But my number 10 is going to be Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. And do I think this movie was too long? Yes. Do I think a Mad Max movie should actually have Mad Max? Yes. I can concede all those points. But the reality is, like, even if it's like possibly my least favorite of all the Mad Max movies, I just love having 2.5 hours more in that world with George Miller at the peak of his powers, just fleshing out that world with all the villains and the technology and the world building and the cities. It's just fucking bananas. In the movie, I feel like it unfolds like a great novel. We just get so much great information. Like, while like Fury Road was a great chase story, like go out into the desert, turn around, and come back. A Mad Max Saga did feel like a saga where we actually got to learn. I think we learned more about this world and Furiosa than in any of the others. And Anya Taylor-Joy just looks absolutely fantastic, especially early on when her hair's still long and it's like whipping around and flames are going by her and she's shooting people with that sniper rifle. She was just hell on wheels and had so much gravitas. And I love seeing Chris Hemsworth having fun playing a villain. It was not as good as Mad Max Fury Road, nor is it as good as the original trilogy. Although, with the original trilogy, I love like the first 30 minutes of Beyond Thunderdome because it feels like what it's about to become Fury Road. I kind of hate the second half of Beyond Thunderdome because of all those fucking kids. I can't stand all the goddamn kids. If you want to ruin a franchise, put a bunch of kids in it. And the final chase scene in Beyond Thunderdome is kind of, it's like the Bud Light version of what we see in Mad Max Fury Road. So anyway, if you love Mad Max, you just got to watch all 5 movies on repeat and just soak in the details that you like. But Furiosa, Mad Max Saga, do I wish the movie had been better? Sure, but it's still my number 10. But my number 9, I have to admit a little personal bias, but I'm going with The Complete Unknown from director James Mangold, starring Timothée Chalamet, because since I saw this movie a couple weeks ago, I've been listening to Bob Dylan nonstop. Like, I think 9 out of every 10 tracks that I listen to on YouTube are a track from a Bob Dylan album, and it's like I've been taking a break from podcasts and YouTube channels just to listen to a shitload of Bob Dylan. And I guess in the end, if your musical biopic about a great figure in music successfully gets you back into that artist's work, well then, mission accomplished, slam dunk. And as I said before in my review, I like this movie primarily for 2 reasons. When Monica Barbaro and Timothée Chalamet take the stage together multiple times to sing together and start harmonizing, it's pure magic. And the fact that you have actors who spent months, and in some cases years, learning to play, learning to sing, and or learning to play or sing better, but actually performing and recording it live then and there, it just makes the movie so much more compelling, so much more authentic. So I love seeing them perform together. But also I feel like Timothée Chalamet, the fact that he's been a massive celebrity for the last couple of years, I feel like he was ideally equipped and prepared to play the kind of bitter, jaded version of Bob Dylan who is rapidly falling out of love with the folk music scene. Like, early on, we could make an argument that perhaps he's not as good as kind of the naive, inexperienced Bob Dylan, but once he starts dressing in black and wearing the shades and he's kind of over it, like Timothée Chalamet really showed us what he's capable of. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed A Complete Unknown, and I look forward to seeing it again.
Are you a serial killer?
What did you just say?
But for my number 8, I'm going with Strange Darling from writer-director J.T. Molnar, starring Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gallner. But this is another movie which reminded me of the great heyday of independent movies in the 1990s, where we did have a ton of really cool, edgy thrillers. It seemed like throughout the entire decade of the 90s, directors would go out into the desert or go out into the woods. They make these cool like murder stories or murder mysteries. Or even in the 80s, a movie like Blood Simple by the Coen brothers. It was a tried and true way, almost like making a horror movie, where you could go make a thriller, build up your reputation, and then launch a very successful career. And I hope the same will hold true for J.T. Molnar. But Strange Darling, shot on film, I believe shot on film by Giovanni Ribisi, if memory serves. But I like how the story was told out of sequence. I like how it had a few interesting curveballs and surprises in terms of the plot. I like the fact that it was intensely erotic. A lot of people have been talking about Baby Girl as an erotic thriller. I'm like, well, Baby Girl's erotic, but it's not a thriller unless you have murder and mayhem and violence and that sort of thing. Like, you can't be an erotic thriller unless there's the threat of death, and Strange Darling definitely has the threat of death. And also some really cool tunes, like that great rendition of Love Hurts, the Roy Orbison tune. So Strange Darling, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I definitely recommend everybody hunt it down. Okay, from my number 7, my number 6, we're going to dive into the rivalry between A24 and Neon. And at this point, I'm a broken record on this channel. I keep talking about how I love how Neon and A24 are direct competitors. They're competing for kind of the art house prestige audience, while occasionally making some really cool, interesting horror movies to kind of bring in the money and pay the bills. And my number 7 and my number 6 could easily have swapped places, but right now, maybe it's just due to recency bias because I saw The Brutalist more recently. I'm going to rank Anora at number 7 and The Brutalist at number 6. I love them both. Anora won the Cannes Film Festival, while Brutalist, maybe just due to the fact that it's coming out later in the year, perhaps it's going to do a better job of winning like the hearts and minds of like the diehard cinephile crowd, or however you want to describe them. But Anora, let's not sleep on it. It's a wild night at the movies. It's intensely erotic. It's edgy as hell. Like, New York is like one of the best cities on planet Earth for filming movies, and every once in a while, a good movie will come along that explores like an unknown corner of New York, or just really puts the city to good use. And director Sean Baker, I feel like he just keeps getting better and better. I mean, the last like 10 or 15 years have been fantastic for his career, but Anora is basically the closest thing to a powerful love story that I saw this year. But I can't stand sentimentality. I can't stand movies that are nauseatingly cute or overly sweet or overly syrupy. Anora's not cute. Anora's not syrupy. It's about love, and it's about lusts, and it's about all kinds of good things. But yeah, Anora, Mikey Madison just absolutely knocked it out of the park. Director Sean Baker knocked it out of the park. I loved Anora. I definitely recommend it. I just don't like it quite as much as The Brutalist, because perhaps The Brutalist, I think it's more ambitious. And does it achieve all of its goals or its aims and its mad ambition? Perhaps not. But I like movies that shoot for the moon, and even if they kind of make it halfway before they come crashing back down to earth, The Brutalist is a reminder that movies can be epic, that can be soaring, that can be transportive, that can be larger than life. That almost like a novel that's 800 pages long that can basically try to capture a complete era, can completely capture the American experience from the point of view of a Jewish immigrant who has survived the Holocaust, but is a great artist who is basically in hiding, shoveling coal and that sort of thing when he should be designing great skyscrapers. Just watching him slowly but surely claw his way back to the point where he can achieve some of the greatest works of his career. In spite of many crippling character flaws, I just found it absolutely riveting. And perhaps if you wanted to call attention to the fact that there may be one too many shots in the movie where with this director, Brady Corbett, perhaps he's wearing his influences a little bit too obviously on his sleeve. There's certain shots when they're walking up the hills, all right, well, that shot is very reminiscent of Ingmar Bergman, one of his heroes in his movie The Seventh Seal. And so I guess, should we dock people points for paying homage to their filmmaking heroes, or should we celebrate the fact that he watches a lot of Ingmar Bergman and Andrei Tarkovsky and things like that, and he's trying to learn from the greatest film artists to have ever done it? Well, I'll let y'all decide. You can decide for yourself. But ultimately, what I hope for The Brutalist is that I hope it will inspire young filmmakers to realize, you know what? You don't just have to do the 15th Star Wars or the 15th Alien or the 15th Star Trek. You don't have to just keep playing that game with diminishing returns. You actually can go out and be completely limitless in your goals and ambitions and in your imagination, creating stories from scratch. And even if you only have $10 million, you can still make it look like a movie shot by David Lean or Christopher Nolan or someone along those lines. I found the entire experience to be incredibly inspiring, and I hope that it'll continue to build an audience as we move into 2025. But let's get into the top 5 with what is easily the gooeyest movie on this list, The Substance, from director Coralie Farjat, if that's how you say her name. Once again, I don't speak French. I'm just going to change the name of this channel to I Don't Speak French, because I'm constantly calling attention to the fact that I don't know how to pronounce any French names and that sort of thing. But Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, Dennis Quaid, they're all incredible in this. And I feel like this is one of those movies where I feel like a DJ was taking requests from the audience. And I was like, please give me a really disgusting practical effects body horror movie with abundant, resplendent female nudity. And they're like, all right, here you go, The Substance. Apart from the excessive length and perhaps missing its emotional peak, I really have no complaints about this movie. I don't think it's nearly as profound or insightful or original as some of the movies that it's drawing inspiration from, like the movies of David Cronenberg. But if you just want to see a great movie about a TV star desperately, trying to cling to their youth at their own expense to the point where you get a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde scenario, it is just gloriously entertaining. And Margaret Qualley, she's rapidly becoming one of my favorite actresses in the business. I mean, just in this past year, she was in a ton of movies, but I think this is the best of the movies in which she appeared. But she was in Kinds of Kindness, and I felt real guilty about not including Kinds of Kindness in my honorable mentions, because I do like director Yorgos Lanthimos quite a bit. However, I feel like Kinds of Kindness, ultimately, it failed to get over the obstacle of making an anthology movie, making it work. I feel like anthology movies always struggle, and they always have one or two good segments and one or two kind of sort of bad segments. But Margaret Qualley was really good in Kinds of Kindness. She's outrageously good in Kinds of Kindness. She's just better in The Substance. And I love her taste. I love her instincts. I just love the fact that she's thrown all caution to the winds, and she's tells her mom and her grandmother, maybe don't go see this one if you're at all sensitive to seeing me, buck-ass naked doing my thing. But I think she's got balls of steel when it comes to her choices. And the director, she's rapidly become a director, Coralie Farjat, where I know that whatever she makes next I'll be absolutely first in line to check it out. So once again, if you like, disgusting mutations and practical effects and warped movies about showbiz and great social satire and an aging goddess and a young goddess, both showing that they absolutely are true the hottest girls on planet Earth, well, then The Substance has got your name written all over it. But moving on to my number 4, we have yet another horror movie. It's crazy. There are 3 horror movies in my top 5. It shows just how good a year it was when it comes to the horror genre. But I'm going with Nosferatu. Robert Eggers just absolutely knocked it out of the park. And what amazed me most was how he took great ingredients from F.W. Murnau's 1922 original. He took great ingredients from Werner Herzog's 1979 remake. And he also went back to the text, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and pulled some great ingredients from that, but at the same time, still made it a unique work of art. The Robert Eggers Nosferatu experience. The cast was all game. The atmosphere was incredible. definitely the most gorgeous, just sumptuous, prestigious horror movie made this year, and I hope it'll be the beginning of a trend where we see horror movies made for like 30, 40, 50 million dollars that are as prestigious and kind of like as much of an awards contender as movies like The Brutalist or Anora and that sort of thing. Like maybe it'll put an end to the negative bias toward the horror genre when it comes to all those organizations out there that like to give out awards. But in the end, who cares about awards? Awards are, I mean, they're great if you win one, but all that matters is the love of the audience, and the love of the audience is what allows filmmakers to make more movies and what allows these movies to kind of continue and to kind of like live on in our imaginations. And I imagine that for a lot of people who've not seen a lot of gothic horror, Nosferatu is going to blow their goddamn minds. Like, oh, I didn't even know horror was like allowed to do this or could do this. Like, if you read a lot of fiction from the 1800s, well, then you'll be well aware of what horror is capable of. But Nosferatu is going to take the audience to very strange, wonderful new places over the next couple of weeks. And I'm relieved to see that, at least initially, that it appears to be making a little bit of money. But what I like is how Nosferatu makes the horror genre feel respectable without defanging or declawing its most visceral ingredients. Like, you still get nudity and gore and brutality and dread and all that good stuff. But they kind of dressed it up a bit. And I like how this movie proves that you don't have to choose between respectability and going for the jugular. You can do both. You can be a respectable work of art while at the same time delivering all the thrills, chills, and suspense that horror fans like. In any case, I was terrified throughout the year that Nosferatu wouldn't live up to our expectations, but I definitely think it's going to be Robert Eggers' most successful movie that he's ever made. Maybe The Witch is still the most emotionally compelling, but Nosferatu, goddamn, it got the job done, and that is enough. And speaking of getting the job done, I feel the same way about Dune Part 2. Is it my perfect idea of what like the second half of the Dune novel should be on the screen? No. Every nerd who likes the Dune books is going to have their idea of what is the best possible version of Dune. And obviously, that's the beautiful thing about reading the book. Again, I've got right here, as well as my paperback here. This is my copy from college. But I've read the first 4 Dune novels, but I think I've read the first book either 3 times or 4 times. Anyway, I've read the first book a couple times. It is very rereadable, and it's just a glorious, epic sci-fi novel, possibly the best science fiction novel ever written. And so anytime you see a movie version or a show based on it, it's going to be that director's interpretation, whether that's Alejandro Jodorowsky or David Lynch, or I can't remember who did the TV version, or Denis Villeneuve, but you're seeing their version that they would like to see, the same way like when Peter Jackson made The Lord of the Rings. It wasn't the definitive Lord of the Rings, that's Peter Jackson's adaptation of The Lord of the Rings. But there's enough about it that works and works really well where I found myself falling under its spell all over again when I revisited it like a week or so ago. I'd seen it in IMAX, and then I had left it alone all year to kind of marinate my brain. And I'm still annoyed that Mentats are largely absent from the story. And I'm still annoyed that Alia is basically like the whole interpretation of the character of Alia. Even though I love Anya Taylor-Joy, I can't stand what they did with the character. And she is my favorite character from the book. So those are 2 big, red X's next to the movie where it is diminished in my eyes. But like Javier Bardem as Stilgar, he's so fucking funny. Like when you think of Dune, you don't really think of like laughter and joy and that sort of thing. But Javier Bardem really makes me feel the laughter and joy while watching it. He's just absolutely hysterical. And what's cool is seeing how Denis Villeneuve fleshes out certain sequences cinematically that aren't even necessarily in the book, but he does them really well. Like the attack on the spice harvester. That's a scene that is made for cinema, brought to life on the big screen. And speaking of scenes that are designed for the big screen in the best possible way, like watching Paul ride the worm for the first time. So badass when he's initially, struggling, but as he starts to rise to his feet and the music kicks in, I'm just like, fuck yeah, it makes me a believer just like Stilgar. And this is the only big budget spectacle that made it onto my top 10 lists. I guess, were there any other real contenders? And I guess the debate is, what is a big budget movie? Like I've heard that A Complete Unknown has a budget of like $70 million. That is a pretty big goddamn budget. But it's obviously not, a blockbuster size. I feel like to be like a real blockbuster contender, you got to be 100 plus and probably more in the $200 million range. But I feel like Denis Villeneuve is one of the few filmmakers out there like Christopher Nolan who knows that you can make smart, sophisticated, like engaging entertainment with some depth and complexity at a large scale without having to dumb it down and basically like remove all the qualities that Like, I can't stand it when people think that, oh, well, in order for a movie to be accessible to a large audience, you have to compromise everything about it in order to make it accessible. I just completely, totally reject that attitude. And hopefully movies like Nosferatu and Complete Unknown and Dune Part 2 will show that you can do big budget genre entertainment and still hang on to your integrity as a filmmaker. But I think in the end, what made Dune Part 2 work for me was the fact that they actually managed to pull off the character of Fade Routha. Hollywood right now really struggles with telling the difference between heroes and villains. Like, I think there are a lot of filmmakers that feel like they've never read any heroic fiction or any myths or legends. They don't seem to get it when it comes to creating, classic adversaries that are about to go to war. But with Paul and Fade, when they square off and like may the knife chip and shatter, and Fade gets all excited and like really responds to that.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
It's fucking awesome. And Austin Butler, I feel like Austin Butler and Timothée Chalamet are two of the best young actors in the business right now. And the fact that we got to see them go to war in this movie was a huge thrill and probably marks a big turning point in the careers for both of them. But yeah, Fade Routha, I loved all those eerie black and white sequences, which I think were shot with infrared film. I love the whole portrayal of Gidi Prime in the Harkonnen world, and watching Leia Seydoux as Lady Fenring, making sure that she gets the seed of Fade in her belly and all that good stuff. Anyway, I loved all those sequences. Love Dune Part 2. I think I like Dune Part 2 more than Dune Part 1, but they are actually kind of interesting in terms of being slightly different in style, but I'm getting carried away. As you can tell, I like Dune Part 2 quite a bit. In spite of all my grievances, now, I wish it had been a little pulpier and a little bit more kind of like sizzling and more like entertaining as opposed to so serious. In the end, any movie that I'm still talking about this much, nearly a year later, clearly made an impression on me. But for my number 2, we're going to go with Oddity, a movie which was my number 1 for a big chunk of the year until it got bumped out of the top slot fairly recently. But when it comes to mysteries, suspense, psychological thrillers, horror, etc., I feel like Oddity is the full package, where with relatively modest means at their disposal or a relatively limited budget, writer-director Damien McCarthy just absolutely hit a home run. And the reason I say home run, it probably got the most visceral, emotional response out of me of any movie this year, where I was curled up in my seat and like pushing back. I mean, I was legitimately freaking out during certain sequences, and one of them I would describe as a jump scare. It gives a good name to jump scares. Usually I can't stand jump scares unless it just like rips your soul clean from your body. I think I just spat. But rip my soul and spinal cord out of my body, the movie absolutely did. And what I really like is when you can see a filmmaker basically performing a magic trick right before your eyes, where you're watching very carefully to see how are they achieving the magic trick or how are they performing the magic trick, even though you know the trick is coming, and it still manages to absolutely fucking petrify you. And I loved Carolyn Bracken in it. Maybe that one of the only criticisms of Oddity is that you have a murder mystery with very few characters, so there are only but so many characters that can be guilty of certain crimes. So maybe on repeat viewings, it won't hold up nearly as well. But this is one of those movies where I was getting in fights with my fellow audience members before, during, and after over talking and using the phones. Basically, the worst crowd experience I had in New York all year was during the Oddity. And yet, in spite of all this distractions and in spite of like stewing in rage and just like wanting to destroy the entire human race, I still managed to completely fall under the spell of Oddity. And then, much to my surprise and delight and joy, when I watched Damien McCarthy's earlier movie, Caveat, which came out in 2020, while the first half of that movie is more of a slow burn, I was thrilled and delighted to see that the second half of the movie delivered all the same chills and suspense and terror that Oddity did. So, of all the filmmakers alive today that are working within the horror genre, Damien McCarthy is my number 1 favorite filmmaker right now, at least who's practicing the craft of suspense, chills, thrills, etc. and so forth. Because it's a very subtle art form, delivering those kinds of stories, those kinds of effects without relying upon the cheap jump scares that most horror movies employ. They are modern day wizards who know how to actually use like shadow and camera angles and performance and sleight of hand to achieve those effects. And so I'm just very impressed by any filmmaker who can kind of get their hooks under my skin at this point in my life when I've seen God knows how many fucking horror movies. So Damien McCarthy, you are the man, and I look forward to whatever you make next. But for my number 1, I'm going with the movie that I imagine a lot of you have not heard of, but hear me out. and I'll do my best to make a case for it, but I'm going with Made in England, the films of Powell and Pressburger. But the reason I like Made in England so much, it's basically a 2-hour and 11-minute film lecture by Martin Scorsese about two of the greatest filmmakers who have ever lived. And what I love most about this movie is that it's done in precisely the same format as my favorite documentary about film history ever made. Personal Journey with Martin Scorsese through American movies. I've seen this documentary, I have no idea how many times. I mean, in college, I would just watch it over and over and over again. I discovered hundreds of old school movies that I love and adore through Martin Scorsese. And I've even got the book on the exact same topic, but anyway, better angle. Personal Journey with Martin Scorsese. Both the book as well as the movie are just fucking incredible, where he basically walks you through like the first couple of decades of movies that had the biggest impression on him when he was a young film freak. But here he is, like not well into his 80s. How old is Martin Scorsese? Is he 80 now? Hang on, IMDb, Martin Scorsese. But here he is at an advanced stage in his career. He's had this giant legendary career. And how does he choose to use his time? His limited time that's left on this planet. All right, so he's 82 years old. He chooses to create this documentary that's a love song to two of his filmmaking heroes. And over the course of this documentary, not only does he go into the biography of Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, but he really gets into the craft and the technique and the strategy employed by these two directors while they made the best movies of their career. And I've not seen all the movies they made as a team. Luckily, I still have a few that are left to see. But off the top of my head, my personal favorites by them, obviously The Red Shoes, Black Narcissus. I might have seen The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp more than any of the others, just because like the subject matter I just find to be so deliriously entertaining. But a strong contender for their best movie would be Stairway to Heaven, aka A Matter of Life and Death. And that might have been the first movie that I saw that was by both Powell and Pressburger. I saw it at a 35mm screening at the LACMA out in LA, and it just absolutely floored me. But 49th Parallel is well worth seeing. Tales of Hoffman is well worth seeing. A Canterbury Tales well worth seeing. I Know Where I'm Going is one of their best. And then Michael Powell went back to working by himself later on in his career and made movies like Peeping Tom. But what's remarkable about this movie is that how many examples can you think of where one of the greatest living directors sits you down for 2 hours and just breaks down every aspect of the career, one of their favorite filmmakers, where you just get to figure out like why were they so successful at what they did, what was unique about their approach to storytelling, how were they able to make movies that you could describe as, and I'm going to borrow this word from my friend Tony Stella, who gave me the term Gesamtkunstwerk. I'm sure I'm saying that incorrectly in German, but what it means is a total work of art, and refers to a work of art that combines multiple art forms into a cohesive whole. And the term was popularized in the 19th century in Germany. But when you're watching the movies of Powell and Pressburger, you're not watching movies by guys who like a lot of movies and decided to make movies. You're watching movies by guys who love ballet, by guys who love opera, who love literature, who love all the aspects of art direction and production design, where every aspect that is creative that's going into the movie is basically considered and crafted with the utmost care. So whether it's the writing or the music or the photography or whatever it is, you know that Powell and Pressburger are putting their heart and soul into every single fucking frame. And I think Powell and Pressburger, they, as a team, they're a strong contender for the best filmmaking team and or best filmmaker ever to come out of the UK. And obviously there are a lot of strong contenders on that front. You could start with Charlie Chaplin, you could go into Alfred Hitchcock, you could go into David Lean. I mean, there's a long list of great filmmakers who have operated and make their careers in the UK. But my interest in this documentary reminds me of a funny comment a friend of mine made at one point, where he was getting a little older and he basically acknowledged that he spends all of his time obsessing over World War II and the American Civil War, almost like, you know, kind of like when people get to a certain age in New York and they just feel like they don't even have a choice. They have to move to Florida. I was like, well, you're allowed to stay in New York as long as you want. No. I'm this age. It's time to go to Florida. Certain guys at a certain age just start obsessing over certain historical topics. But for me, film history documentaries, that is my equivalent of somebody who's gotten too obsessed with the American Civil War and or World War II. I could watch documentaries about film history, as long as they're well made, all goddamn day, and be gloriously entertained, because in the end, film history is one of my great passions. Like, the reason I have a YouTube channel is because it's not because I necessarily love reviewing new releases. I review new releases because they're better for getting traffic. But if I could just have a channel devoted to reviewing old movies all day, every day, I probably My interest is probably much more in line with that, but I also want people actually to see the channel and discover the channel. So I try to find a balance between old movies and new movies. But with Made in England, the films of Powell and Pressburger, my interest in covering new movies and my love and obsession with old movies collided. And so that is why Made in England, the films of Powell and Pressburger, is my number one. And if you don't agree, well then go make your own list. This list is mine. But I think I'm ready to start editing this sucker and get this video out into the world. So thank you so much for sticking with me and indulging me as I rant and rave about all the good and the bad movies of 2024. And I'll be coming back to this topic on the evening of the 29th, where I've got Jonathan James, Marcus Penn, and Bill Scurry coming back. We're going to do a big end of the year roundtable discussion. Rob Cowder sadly cannot make it, but I'll probably get that edited and posted at the latest by Monday the 30th. So last year that video did really well when we did that roundtable conversation. So hopefully lightning can strike twice in the same place as I let my guests count down their top 10 favorite movies of 2024. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, sharing the video, hitting the notification bell. You know the drill. But I hope everybody has an amazing New Year's Eve celebration, a great 2025, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.